So with that in mind, what is a special occasion speech? Well, by definition, a special occasion speech is, it's kind of broad. So I'm going to cover a few things first. Special occasion speeches are speeches that help give occasions their specialness. Um, Special occasion speeches are often given at christenings, weddings, funerals. In regards to a funeral, I'm talking usually about a eulogy. Graduation speeches, which I hope that you make sure to do at your own graduation parties when that time comes for you. Award ceremonies. You've seen these on award ceremonies in both music and the entertainment industry as a whole. Any kind of award acceptance speech is going to fall under the special occasion title. Inaugurals, retirement dinners, and so much more. So special occasion speeches are actually something that we don't necessarily do regularly, but when the time arises that we do need to give a special occasion speech, then we do need to know how to do that. So special occasion speeches are different than any other speeches we've discussed so far in the course because they may, even though they do convey information and they even persuade people at times, that's not really what their primary purpose is. The primary purpose of a special occasion speech is to fit the special needs of that special occasion. And of course, those are going to change based off the wide range of special occasion speeches that you can perform. If we're talking about weddings or christenings or something like that, then you're going to be doing something more celebratory, more upbeat, something that encourages and brings joy. Whereas you are possibly doing a eulogy at a funeral or something along those lines, well, of course, then the special occasion is obviously going to change, and that's going to be more of a tribute style. But we're going to go over all of these things in great detail a little bit later. Now, a speech of introduction is actually a type of special occasion speech. And a speech of introduction, by definition, is a speech that introduces the main speaker to the audience. And you've actually seen these before, you just might not have known exactly what they were. But if you are introducing another speaker, you will need to accomplish three purposes in your speech of introduction. The first thing you need to try to do is build enthusiasm for the upcoming speaker. That's primarily what you're trying to do there is create some form of enthusiasm about the speaker that's to come. You can do that in a lot of different ways, and I'll give you some examples a little bit later on in the lecture. You also want to build enthusiasm for the speaker's topic. It's important that people aren't just interested in the speaker that's coming up or their, possibly even their like celebrity status or something along those lines, but also they need to be enthusiastic about what the topics can cover as well. And then also you want to try to establish a welcoming climate that will boost the speaker's credibility. Now we're going to talk about this a lot further in just a moment, but make sure that you don't over-sing their praises, so to speak. You want to create, there's a fine line there. You want to create a welcoming climate because that does help to boost the speaker's credibility, but you don't want to be overly complimenting in any way because that can stress the speaker out a little bit or it could put unrealistic pressures on them. Now, a good speech of introduction can be a joy to hear and it can ease the task of the main speaker. It can make them feel more comfortable, more welcomed. It can create an environment that is conducive for them to deliver their speech. So a few guidelines for speeches of introduction are: be brief. Remember that the purpose of a speech of introduction is not to focus the attention on yourself, but rather on the main speaker. So, kind of monitor what you're saying. Make sure that you are being brief and being clear and being accurate. We're going to talk about a few of those things in just a moment. But you want a speech of introduction to be generally no more than about 2 to 3 minutes. Now, it can be shorter if the speaker is already well known. And I have an example here. And the example says, distinguished guests, the President of the United States. You've probably heard a few times of someone do a speech of introduction. Maybe it was a televised speech or something like that where they've said distinguished guests or something along those lines and then just said the President of the United States. Well, the reason they left it that short, and I know that is very brief, but the reason they did that was because the President of the United States is so well known that any other further comments or remarks that you might have would probably seem to be almost inappropriate, and I have here almost silly as well. There's no need to establish credibility there. There's no need to go into his past experiences and so forth. He's known to us. He's our president. So anything else just seems over the top. Also, another guideline for a speech of introduction is to make sure your remarks are completely accurate. Now, one way to do that is to always check with the main speaker in advance and make sure that the introduction that you have is accurate in every aspect. You want to make sure that you've got the facts right. You know, if you're talking about their background, you want to make sure that you're accurate on all the points that you're making. There's nothing worse than a person that's trying to do a speech of introduction and they've got the facts all jumbled. So you want to make sure that you have every aspect correct. If the speaker's name is difficult to pronounce, and I mention this because I've seen this happen on several occasions, if the main speaker's name is difficult to pronounce, and of course you're doing a speech of introduction, so you do need to know how to pronounce that person's name, you want to ask how to pronounce the name in advance, and then work on that and practice it. So don't ask the day of, how is it that you, but how do you properly pronounce your name? You want to ask that well in advance, give yourself time to practice it a little bit. That way you're comfortable with the person's name and you want to make sure that you are accurate with that information. Another guideline for a speech of introduction is to adapt your remarks to the occasion. And I actually talked about this just a couple of slides back, but you are probably going to be constrained by the nature of the occasion. So in those situations, if you are at a formal occasion, let's say a formal business dinner, then you're going to want to do a formal style of a speech of introduction. But on the flip side of that, let's say that you're at an informal occasion. Let's say it's just, a casual Christmas party or something like that. I don't know, just something along those lines. It's going to require you to be a little less formal. So gauge the occasion itself and make sure to tailor your message accordingly. Another guideline is to adapt your remarks to the main speaker. A speech of introduction that leaves the main speaker feeling uncomfortable in any way has probably failed in part in its purpose. Because the whole reason that we do these speeches of introduction is not only to just create that enthusiasm about the topic and the speaker for the audience, but on the flip side of that, it's to help the main speaker feel welcomed. So if you've made them feel uncomfortable, well, then it's pretty much in part defeated its purpose. Now, how do you avoid this? How do you avoid making the main speaker feel uncomfortable? Well, first off, and I actually touched on this a few slides back, but do not overpraise the person. A lot of times we mean well by that. A person that does a speech of introduction is trying to create that welcoming atmosphere. So they go over and above just praising this person like there's no tomorrow. But the problem with that is this creates unrealistic expectations. So you want to avoid saying things such as, our speaker will keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. Well, things such as these, like I said, they create expectations that are almost impossible to fulfill, and they really just make the main speaker feel uncomfortable. So we want to avoid that. Also, and I've heard this done on many occasions as well, you don't want to give off embarrassing details of the speaker's personal life or make remarks that are in poor taste. And I have an example here. But you want to avoid things, and I know this one's kind of blatant, but you'll get the gist of what I mean by this. You want to avoid things such as this. I've known Margaret Fillmore since she was 10 years old, and she used to dream about marrying Justin Timberlake. Yet here we are, and she is just marrying Bob today. Well, while this speaker may find this funny and maybe trying to, create a humorous moment there, it will probably not be funny to everyone else, especially to Margaret, and it may even be hurtful to her. So we want to, again, try to adapt your remarks to the main speaker. Try not to make them feel uncomfortable, and don't give off embarrassing personal life details or make remarks that are in poor taste for that matter. Another guideline for a speech of introduction is to adapt your remarks to the audience. Your aim is to make this particular audience want to hear this particular speaker on this particular subject. So pay attention to what I'm saying there. Your aim is to make this particular audience want to hear this particular speaker on this particular subject. So you really have to adapt your remarks to create that interest, to build credibility, and to create enthusiasm about not only the speaker, but the subject or the topic as well. Now, if the speaker is not well known, because I know I just gave you the example of the president, but if the speaker is not well known to the audience, then you're going to need to establish his or her credibility by possibly recounting some of the speaker's main achievements and explaining why either he or she is qualified to speak on this topic. You know, if they are well known, you're going to want to avoid that. But if it's someone that people just are not familiar with, you're going to want to go over a few of those things. Another guideline for a speech of introduction is to try to create a sense of anticipation and drama. Now, again, this is not a, you want to kind of limit this a little bit. This is not a theatrical play, and so forth. But, it's always good to have that sense of anticipation about the topic and the speaker, as well as a little bit of drama there. And this can be done by saving the speaker's name for last. A lot of people do this technique, and I think it works really well. And here's an example. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to introduce to you a tennis legend. You've been watching her play for almost 20 years. Few of us can forget her early matches against Steffi Graf, her 5 Wimbledon championships, her 29 Grand Slam titles, or her 4 Olympic gold medals. The story of how she climbed to the top of our sport is well known. After starting the game at age 4, she turned professional when she was 14, along with her older sister, Venus. She quickly emerged as a rare talent and a fierce competitor, but nothing comes without a struggle. In addition to the on-court competition, she has dealt with off-court issues such as mental fatigue, health scares that nearly ended her career, and debates over women, race, and body image. Today, she's going to talk to us about playing through the struggles of life and remaining resilient in the face of adversity. I also hope she'll give us some pointers on perfecting our backhands. Please give a warm welcome to Serena Williams. So you see how we did that there. We saved the speaker's name until last. We really created that sense of anticipation and drama for who was to come. And then we introduced it at the last little bit there. And I know that, you also might be interested in this as well. Notice how that was brief, but it was clear. Speeches of introduction do not have to be very long, like I said before. So this is actually a pretty good speech of introduction. Okay. Another type of special occasion speech are speeches of presentation. Now, a speech of presentation by definition is a speech that presents someone a gift, an award, or some other form of public recognition. These speeches are also usually brief, and they may even be no more than a mere announcement of some sort, or even can be up to 4 to 5 minutes long, but definitely no longer than that. Now, the main purpose of a speech of presentation is to tell the audience why the recipient is receiving that award. You want to make sure when you do this that you are pointing out his or her contributions, achievements, and so forth. This is a very important part of a speech of presentation. Depending on the audience and the occasion, you may also need to discuss about 2 other matters here. If the audience is not familiar with the award, you need to explain that briefly. Sometimes, we all know what an Oscar is or a Grammy is or so forth, but sometimes we just don't know the particulars of such. Now, of course, in everyday life, most of us aren't going to have very much experiences with the Oscars or the Grammys events. So, it might be something such as, even something as simple as Employee of the Month. It could be something that is a little less known as well, such as a particular award named after a person or something along those lines. Whatever it is, if you feel that the audience is not familiar with that award, you need to make sure that you do explain the award briefly, but make sure you give an explanation there. Now, if the award was won in a public competition and the audience knows who the losers are, you might take a moment to praise the losers here. And I think this could be done, well, I've got an example here actually, and that might be presenting a Teacher of the Year award. Let's say that you've got 100 wonderful, just exemplary teachers in the room, but this one particular teacher won the actual award. Now, while all of the 99 others that are sitting out in the crowd are just wonderful teachers in their own right, this other person still won. So what you might want to do is address your remarks to the larger group of teachers, praising their accomplishments, their achievements, thanking them for their hard work and dedication, all those different things before you turn the focus onto the actual honoree. And that's a good thing just to kind of think about there. Another type of special occasion speech are speeches of acceptance. An acceptance speech, by definition, is a speech that gives thanks for a gift, an award, or some other form of public recognition. Make sure that when you are delivering this type of speech that you thank the people who are bestowing the award and also recognize the people that helped you gain it. So, some good characteristics of a well-skilled acceptance speech are brevity, humility, and graciousness. So when you're designing a speech in which you are accepting an award or a gift or some other form of public recognition, you want to be brief, but be clear and accurate, of course. You want to be humble and really not come off as egotistic or something along those lines. And you want to appear gracious. That's very important because these people chose you for the award, the gift, or whatever. So be gracious in your comments. Okay, now commemorative speeches is something I also want to talk about here. By definition, a commemorative speech is a speech that pays tribute to a person, a group of people, an institution, or an idea. Commemorative speeches are speeches of praise or celebration towards a person, a group of people, an institution, or an idea, like I just mentioned. A few examples of commemorative speeches could include a eulogy at a funeral. It might include, I just put holiday speeches here, but I have an example like a 4th of July style speech. Not necessarily not necessarily an informative style speech on the 4th of July, because that's not what I'm talking about here. But paying tribute to the brave, soldiers that fight for our freedoms every day. Something along those lines. And then dedications also would be a commemorative speech as well. This speech can be very similar, though, to an informative style of speaking, as you have to give the audience information about your subject. So it does have informative speaking traits in it. You may use these elements that I'm just about to list for you here to illustrate the achievements of your subject, whatever that is. Examples are great things to use in commemorative speeches. Testimony is a wonderful thing as well. And you can even use facts and statistics. It just depends on, of course, how you use it. However, don't forget that your main purpose of this type of speech, a commemorative speech, is not to inform your listeners, but rather to inspire them. You want to heighten their appreciation of or admiration for that person, that institution, or that idea that you're praising. And I have an example here as well. If you're paying tribute to someone, you can't simply recount the details of that person's life. For instance, let's say at a eulogy. Rather, you should capture the essence of your subject and generate in your audience a deep sense of respect. So let's say that I was doing a eulogy at a funeral of someone that just really meant the world to me. I would really want to pay tribute to that person. I'm not going to just say, well, they were born here, they did these things in life, they had these accomplishments, and then unfortunately they passed away on this date. That's just the dry facts, and it's not something that is capturing the essence of that person. So you want to try to really go in to the appreciation and the admiration of that person and create that deep sense of respect that I just mentioned. Now, when speaking to commemorate, you might want to do this by expressing feelings. Of course, you don't want to express feelings of anger or anything like that, not negative feelings. You want to express positive feelings. You want to try to stir sentiments such as joy, hope, and more. Also create anticipation or celebration about something. Excuse me. If you're doing a eulogy, then you might want to lament and console, or perhaps even create admiration or respect for that person, just like we just discussed. Okay, so we're going to flip subjects for the remainder of the lecture, and I want to talk about small groups because this is something that you're going to use in both your professional and personal lives. There's going to be times in, like I said, your professional or personal lives in which you're going to find it necessary to speak in a small group setting. And this might be in the business setting. It could be working in groups with classmates. It could be working in volunteer positions, and just so much more. Most of you have probably even already spoken this type of setting, but just really didn't um, know about it or think about it in these terms. So what is a small group? Well, by definition, a small group is a collection of 3 to 12 people who assemble for a specific purpose. So 3 to 12 people, that's pretty much what the limit is there. But I do want to throw this in there. A group of 2 persons is actually called a dyad. Just so you know, it's called a dyad. In small group communication, all participants are potentially speakers and listeners. So it's a little different than the public speaking setting because you're going to be both a speaker and a listener in this group setting. Now, a problem solution small group is often formed to solve a particular problem. A few examples that I have here of a small group in which they would be a problem solution small group would be a business group considering ways of increasing sales, or perhaps a church group discussing how to raise funds and provide for the needy, or even a group of parents working to improve daycare facilities. All of these types of groups would be problem solution small groups in that they are formed to help to solve a particular problem. You will almost surely be a member of many, not just one, many problem solution small groups during your lifetime. Trust me. And if most of you went back and really thought about some of the things you've done in your own lives, you'd find that you've already been a part of many small groups and probably even problem solution small groups. So small groups versus public speaking. Although speaking in a small group is not the same as public speaking, it does involve similar skills. Members of a small group influence one another through communication, and we do that with public speaking as well. As a participant in a small group, you might influence your colleagues by giving them important information, by encouraging them to speak, or by convincing them to change their minds, even by getting them to end a meeting of the group. Well, what about leadership in small groups? That's a good question. Small groups often make better decisions than individuals do, but to do so, they really need effective leadership. By definition, leadership is going to be the ability to influence group members so as to help achieve the goals of the group. There are different kinds of leadership as well, and I want to discuss these. Sometimes there is no specific leader as members have equal influence. I personally feel, though, that, and your textbook doesn't go into this, but I personally feel that this is generally not the case. Usually you do have a leader of some sorts, which we'll discuss what I mean by that in just a minute. But an example of this could be a class project in which you and several classmates are working together. From time to time, each of you will help the group move towards its goal by suggesting when and where to meet, by outlining the strengths and weaknesses of a certain viewpoint, by resolving disagreements among other members, and so forth. Notice how when a need for leadership arises, such as in this situation, that any of these members will choose to provide the necessary leadership. So that's a little bit of a different scenario there. I wouldn't say that it's too common, but we'll talk about different examples now of leadership. The next one I want to talk about is implied leadership, and by definition, that is a group of members to whom other members defer because of his or her rank, experience, or other qualities. An example of implied leadership is if a business meeting includes one vice president and several subordinates, the vice president will probably become the implied leader. And that's because they are the person to which the other members are going to defer to because of his or her rank, their expertise, or other qualities such as their vice president title. Another type of leader would be an emergent leader, and by definition, that is a group member who emerges as a leader during the group's deliberations. Sometimes, in certain situations, groups will start off with absolutely no leader, but may take on an emergent leader later on. This is a person who, by ability or even by force of personality or just by talking the most, takes on that leadership role. So this could be someone that just has a really strong personality that kind of overtakes the group. The emergence of a leader may or may not be desirable in this group setting. either way, the emergent leader still emerges, and that's just kind of what they do because they usually have some form of a really strong personality. However, if a group is stalemated or has dissolved into bickering or making jokes and just not really staying on track, an emergent leader can put the group back on track. So it's not necessarily a bad thing there. Now, one danger, though, could be that the emergent leader may not be the most effective leader, but might just be the most assertive personality in the group. So just something to kind of think about there. And the last type of leadership I want to talk about is designated leaders. And that is a person who is elected or appointed as leader when the group is formed. One side note I wanted to discuss here, though, is if a group meets for only one session and they have a particular task that they need to complete, they almost always should have a designated leader who takes care of the procedural tasks, which we'll talk about what procedural tasks are in just a second, and also works to serve as the spokesperson for the group. Just keep in mind that while a group may or may not need a specific leader, it always needs some form of leadership for the most part. Functions of leadership. Well, an effective leader helps the group in a lot of different ways. It can help the group to reach its goals by fulfilling 3 overlapping sets of needs, and that's going to be procedural needs, task needs, and maintenance needs. Now, I'm going to define these and then I'm going to go into them in great detail, but procedural needs are routine housekeeping actions necessary for the efficient conduct of business in a small group. Task needs are substantive actions necessary to help a small group complete its assigned task. And then maintenance needs are going to be communicative actions necessary to maintain interpersonal relations in a small group setting. And like I said, I'm going to give you some good tips on this. Let's talk about procedural needs first, though. Procedural needs can be thought of, like I said, as those housekeeping requirements of the group. The procedural needs of a group are things such as deciding when and where the group will meet, reserving the room, checking the number of chairs, making sure the heat or the air conditioner is turned on in the room, setting the agenda of each meeting, starting the meeting, taking notes during the meeting, preparing and distributing any handouts needed for the meeting, and also summarizing the group's progress at the end of the meeting. Now, if there is a designated leader for the group, he or she can attend to these procedural needs, or they can choose to assign one or more group members to do this as well. Otherwise, members of the group will need to split those procedural needs amongst themselves. Task needs are another set of needs that happens in the small group setting. Task needs are substantive actions necessary to help the group complete the particular task it's working on. And these things are going to be a few examples here: analyzing the issues facing the group, distributing the workload among the members, collecting information, soliciting the views of other members, keeping the group from going off on a tangent, playing devil's advocate for unpopular ideas, formulating criteria for judging the most effective solution, and also helping the group reach consensus on its final recommendations. All members should help the group satisfy its task needs. So it doesn't just need to be one person doing this. It needs to be all the members working to satisfy those task needs. And then we have maintenance needs. And maintenance needs involve interpersonal relations in the group. These things include how well members get along with one another, how willing members are to contribute to the group, whether members are supportive of one another, whether members feel satisfied with the group's accomplishments, and also whether members feel good about their roles in the group. Now, if interpersonal problems dominate the group discussions, the group will have a very difficult time working together and reaching a decision, much less a consensus decision. So a leader can do a lot to create and sustain supportive communication in the group by helping group members handle conflict, by working out differences of opinions, by reducing interpersonal tension, also by encouraging participation from all members, being alert to personal feelings, and just promoting solidarity within the group. Responsibilities, though, in a small group, every member of a small group must assume certain responsibilities because that's just what you do in the small group setting. You need to make sure that you're assuming certain responsibilities. And these things are going to be to commit yourself to the goals of the group. Commit yourself to the goals of your group. Fulfill individual assignments. Avoid interpersonal conflicts. Encourage full participation. And just keep the discussion on track as a whole. Now I want to talk about the reflective thinking method. And the reflective thinking method offers a step-by-step process for discussion in problem-solving groups. And it consists basically of 5 steps. You want to first define the problem. After this, you want to analyze the problem. Next, you want to establish criteria for solving the problem. Next, you're going to generate possible solutions. And then finally, you'll select the best solution. So now let's really look at each one of these things separately. Step 1, you want to define the problem. So before a problem-solving group can make progress, it has to know exactly what problem it's trying to solve. Now, the best way to define the problem in this type of setting is to phrase it as a question of policy. Now, by definition, a question of policy is going to be a question about whether a specific course of action should or should not be taken. And I have a great example here to help you understand this. An example might be, what measures should our schools take to improve on-campus security for students? What measures should our school take to improve on-campus security for students? So you see there that it's asking whether a specific course of action should or should not be taken. Questions of policy usually include the word should. That's something to remember there. So if you see the word should, it's probably, in that question, it's probably a question of policy. Step 2, you want to analyze the problem. I put this on here because I see this happen too often, but too often groups tend to start mapping out our solutions before they have a firm grasp on what's wrong with the situation. Investigating the problem will allow thoroughly, for that matter, investigating it thoroughly, analyzing the problem thoroughly will allow the group to be in a much better position to devise a workable solution. Now, when we analyze the problem, you should pay particular attention to 2 questions. How severe is the problem? You want to investigate its scope, determine how many people it affects, and assess what might happen if it's not resolved. And then the second thing you want to pay particular attention to when analyzing the problem is you want to look at what are the causes of the problem. You want to check the history of the problem and learn what factors contributed to it. Analyzing the problem requires research, so make sure to dig in with that research. Step 3 is to establish criteria for solutions. You must establish criteria to guide you in your decision. So once your group has defined the problem and analyzed the problem, you shouldn't just jump in immediately to start proposing solutions. Instead, you should establish criteria or standards for responsible solutions. Now, by definition, that criteria there means standards on which a judgment or a decision can be based. Step 4 is to, generate possible solutions. So once your group has the problem defined, has analyzed the problem, has established that criteria for a solution, and has that firmly in mind, you're ready to discuss possible solutions. Your goal at this stage is to come up with the widest possible range of potential solutions, not to judge the solutions at this point. That's actually going to be in the next step. So just come up with the widest possible range of potential solutions to the issue. Many groups find the technique of brainstorming to be quite helpful in this stage. By definition, brainstorming is just a method of generating ideas by free association of words and thoughts. Brainstorming, though, really has 2 advantages. It encourages creativity and it also encourages equal participation. So brainstorming can be a great way to come up with potential solutions to the problem. And then we're at the final step. Step 5, select the best solution. So after potential solutions have been listed, after you've brainstormed them, it's time to evaluate them. The best way to do this is to discuss each solution with regard to the criteria that you established in step 3, and then move to the next solution and so on. So really judge each possible solution in regards to the criteria you established in step 3. This orderly process, the reason we do it this way is because this orderly process ensures that all potential solutions receive equal consideration. The group should also try to reach a consensus at this point. And a consensus is going to be a group decision that is acceptable to all members of the group. So that's what we want to strive for there. And with that in mind, that is it. If you have any questions or comments about the live lecture, the material as a whole, or just anything in the course, feel free to reach out to me using the email feature in the course. Otherwise, I am absolutely just so proud of you guys. You've made it to the end. Don't give up yet, though, because you have a little bit still left to do to end the course successfully. And if you just keep up that determination, I know you can do anything you want to in life. So my best wishes on your future endeavors, and thank you so much. I hope to see you guys around.